All right. Hey, folks. Just doing a tech check here. Can everyone see and hear us? If you can, give us a thumbs up in the chat. Amazing, amazing. Yeah, so there's already 20 people in here. So thanks y'all for joining for our webinar Scaling Beyond Borders. Um, we have Matt here from Zamp as well as Anna from Stoko. And right before we get started, I just want to drop a question for all of y'all already. What's the biggest cross-border surprise you've hit so far in 5 words or less? So if you could drop that in the chat already, that would be awesome. Yeah, and we'll get started in a couple minutes here. But I'll let Matt and Anna do their own introductions.
Matt, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, Mac Grattan. I am SVP of Revenue at Zamp. I've been here for over 3 years. And I've been in the sales tax space for, over 15 years. So I've seen a lot of things in terms of where the market's gone, and also from an international seller perspective, whether you're selling from the EU or you're Canadian merchant, the requirements that you have selling into the US and how those have changed over the years. So I look forward to covering more detail on those during the session. I do want to mention I live in the Seattle area on Bainbridge Island, and I've got my wife, my dog Ruthie. Very important that I mention Ruthie, and then my 3 kids. So I'm in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Anna Picarelli. I work for Stoko, and Stoko, we make supportive apparel, which I'll get into a little bit later. We're based in Vancouver, British Columbia. I also have a dog who wouldn't know whether or not I mentioned her, but we'll bring her up anyway. Her name is Kona. She is Bernedoodle and full of energy. But I have been a part of Stoko for over 2 years now, and we're a small team, big, but we do some mighty work. And our company creates medical grade supportive apparel, which is pretty much a knee brace and compression tight that we put together with high strength cables in our fabric with 2 adjustment dials on the back, so you can have customizable support. The goal of our company is just help people get active, and we're trying to reach our goal of helping 1 million people get back to doing what they love.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you so much for that, Anna. Yeah, there's a great couple of exchanges in the chat already regarding taxes and foreign exchange costs. So we'll definitely get that to your question and answers at the end of our session today. It's 6 minutes past, so I think we can go get started. Yeah, I know, Anna, you did a little bit of your intro already, but today you are the spotlight. We would love to get to know Stoko and your role in it. If you can give us kind of a quick 60-second and maybe a little more in-depth dive on your role at Stoko, that would be amazing.
Yeah, so just a quick little recap. We make supportive apparel. And at our company, we have a small team, and we all have to kind of put on different hats every day to get things done. So I come from a background as an ex-professional athlete, so I kind of hardwired with this team first mentality. And that's great because it allows me to step into different areas of the company and just provide support wherever I can. And when I joined the company, one of those areas that somebody needed to step into was US sales tax, and finding a solution to help our company continue to have our success across the border with our US sales. So that's why I'm here today.
Okay, amazing. And Matt, like I know you spoke a little about Zamp, and we all know your passion about sales tax because you shared that with us a lot at Ecom North. Just to dive a bit deeper, in terms of, I know you mentioned a bit about who you are. Why does this conversation matter for anyone in the room with US revenue?
Yeah, it's I think what changed, and I go back to 2018 when the Supreme Court made the decision of Wayfair versus South Dakota, ruling in favor with South Dakota of the concept of allowing states to bind companies to collect sales tax based on how much they sell. So that would be either tied to order or revenue volume, depending on the state rules. And by legalizing that in the US, it created a whole new paradigm shift because before Stoko could have operated out of Canada, ship product cross border. There would be the associated landed cost, and that would be involved. But they could have done all their shipping out of Canada and really not have any requirements in the U.S. before the concept of economic nexus. Or they may have had inventory in one state and had a one state requirement. Um, Now, with the concept of economic nexus, companies now are, as they sell into the US, those requirements are growing, based on the state rules, based on crossing the economic nexus thresholds of specific states. So compliance grows fast. It's interesting too. We've done some analysis based on U.S. Census data, personal expenditure percentages by state, and overlaying that with the state economic nexus threshold rules. Even if you're doing a couple million a year in the U.S., you could probably have upwards of 7 to 10 states you have to collect in. There are states that literally, like Ohio, for example, 200 orders or 100,000 in revenue triggers nexus in that state. And so it happens really quickly, and it, across some of these states, and it just the amount of volume you do as you grow to 5, 10 million and beyond, the number of states just continues to grow as well. So, the concept of physical nexus is still there as well. So if you have inventory, if you have employees, if you have an office, if you are working with Amazon and they're moving your product throughout distribution centers in the US, that is also still a trigger. But the economic nexus is now overlaid to that. Again, was just changed really the paradigm for sellers, that are selling into the US from Canada.
Yeah, no, th thank you for that, Matt. Like you always give us such an amazing wealth of knowledge. So thank you for that. And yeah, I guess practically I know Anna, we'd love to understand your journey here with Zap as well. So what's the one cross-border thing that sorry, let me backtrack a little bit. So when did we sell in the US stop becoming a sales tech line and start being a daily operational thing on your end? And what changed first?
Yeah, so I was lucky to join Stoko at a very exciting time. That was in October of 2023. And that was a pivotal moment where our US sales were really starting to increase right around then. In fact, we were outpacing our Canadian sales with our US sales. And so as we generated a lot of momentum going into that Q4, as exciting as it was, and it was our most successful sales moment in our company history, it was all of a sudden all those trigger words that Matt was just saying: economic nexus, thresholds, which state was this many orders and which state was an amount of money. And we all of a sudden had to quickly educate ourselves to what economic nexus meant for each state. And to his point, we had already triggered it in California because that was where we were shipping out of at the time. So we kind of needed to take that moment and step back and really understand what the new landscape was for our company and what that meant regarding state thresholds. And in addition to that, we have the additional curveball of our product is classified as a medical device. So even in the bigger picture of things, it was, where does our product fit in the sales tax picture? Do those tax codes change or what? And we just had to make sure that we were set in that moment as we expanded. Okay, what are the next steps?
Okay, yeah, amazing. It's also great to hear the journey of Stoko, right? Like I remember when I first checked out your product. It's a really cool product. So if anyone has like would want to see a very innovative new medical product, I think that's what you said is classified now.
Yeah.
Please check out Stoko. It's a very cool product.
Yes.
Okay, amazing. And I guess just from what you said as well, it's like what's the one cross-border thing that blindsided you, right? Something that you could never predicted from a spreadsheet.
Well, I think as I mentioned, we had triggered Nexus in California. And so when I joined, we were required to file our first sales tax return by October 31st. So I had joined in the middle of the month, and we didn't really have any other option but to file it ourselves at the time. So I was the newest member of the company, which meant I had the most bandwidth to step into this area and provide some support. So I took on spearheading, filing that first return with the help of my manager, Sana, and our data analyst. And if anyone here is familiar at all with California sales tax, it's a very complicated state. And the level of detail per county is shocking because it varies throughout the entire state. And so I remember we're trying to file this. We are learning as we go. The deadline is getting closer and closer as the day passes. And it was really a buzzer beater moment for us to submit this filing before the deadline. And it was also a bit of a Hail Mary because we were trying to learn and get it done as quickly as possible. We thankfully did. We sent it in, and thankfully a California agent was super kind to us, and he contacted us to kindly point out a few errors that we had to be made, and credit to them because they actually lent us a helping hand instead of just telling us this is wrong and try again. And so we didn't just have to leave our mistakes on the table, and we were able to fix them and submit it. But it was the first real experience that anyone in our company had with US sales tax. And it was this major wake-up call of wow, this really requires an expert to take on this task. And I think when you're a growing company, that's just something that you really have to rely on finding the right person to help you with that.
Yeah, and I've heard this from lots of founders too. California sales tax is definitely a beast to deal with. Yeah,
Yes.
Matt, like, did you any interesting things about California sales tax that you've seen other brands go through as
Well,
well?
the challenge with California is obviously it's a very big state, and you're going to do a lot of sales volume if you're selling in the U.S. in California. So they have different schedules, like a lot of states do, with like monthly, quarterly returns and so on. But they also build in a prepay option, so you have to prepay a certain percentage of the expected collected tax potentially if you're filing quarterly, and then you true up on the quarterly filing. So there's definitely some math that comes into the equation in terms of making sure that you file the monthly prepay filings correctly, tied to that quarterly filing. And then the form itself, it has all of the state administered jurisdictions where you have to break out all the associated data accurately and all the different fields, all your product level exemptions and other types of exemptions. So I think we did a little test where we had people try to do the form manually and how long it would take them. And I think that most people like just ended up quitting before they, finished the test because it's just completely difficult in terms of just filing it manually. So that's why a lot of our customers they're looking for that automated option. It's just California just is one of those states that just makes it difficult.
That makes me
Yeah,
feel better about our experience, Matt, since we did file it manually and even experts have a little bit of difficulty with it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So it's yeah, and I think the other thing is when you file it with California, you talk to someone at the state who's actually friendly and nice and helpful, which is
Yes.
great. You don't always get that at the Department of Revenue there in Sacramento. But I would say that you your ability to file it accurately is really important, not just in California, but every state, because when you're filing accurately, you're off the radar for potential future audits. California has a look back period of 8 years. If you're filing on time and you're at, with payments and everything, probably they look 3 to 4 years, right? But there is that audit look back period, and you just want to remain off that radar. So that means filing all your exemptions correctly. If you're selling on Amazon, filing those orders correctly under the marketplace facilitator laws, bucketing all your exemptions, or the jurisdictional information correctly. So all of this just becomes really important is how do I stay off the radar so I can just remain friends with the people in Sacramento. So and I think that's something we hear, a lot about too, is we got red flagged because we didn't file accurately or we didn't file on time. Those things, that's what the auditors look for in those situations.
yeah, yeah. Thank you so because Matt, you have such wealth of knowledge from working with so many brands, which leads perfectly to my next question, which is most founders treat like US sales tax like a math problem, right? From everything and working across like hundreds of brands, like what is it actually?
Yeah, I mean, so I think when I think about the math problem, like you can say essentially sales tax, and just like Canadian tax, like filing with the CRA and the your GST, HST, and all of the provincial taxes, it's just the cost of doing business, right? It's a fiduciary responsibility you have as a business in Canada or the US. And so when it's interesting when I do talk to companies out there, they'll want to know, hey, how much is it going to cost me, right? And that's obviously an important thing. What's your cost? But when I look at the math problem, I want to factor in a couple of other things, right? I want to factor in how much time am I going to spend on it? With if I'm using a third party or a service provider, how much time am I expected to provide, maintaining it, tracking it, updating it? Because all of the things change all the time in terms of state rules or your requirements tied to your compliance position and your growth, right? So, and then the other piece is the risk. What is my risk reduction tied to the process that I have? Is it being done correctly, right? Am I off that audit radar that we talked about? And when you think about risk, you can think about filing accurately, but one of the things Anna mentioned was the taxability of the medical products and how the states viewed that. Like there are a lot of different categories in the US that have exemptions or partial exemptions. This is similar to Canada, when you have your zero rated products, groceries, prescription drugs, some ag products. And you also have exempt products, right? So various services, financial services, health services, legal aid services. There's lots of services that have exemptions as well in the US. And it could be tied to a full exemption, a partial exemption. It could be tied to a threshold, the dollar value of the product that triggers the exemption or taxability rule. But the common categories are going to be apparel, food and beverage, supplements, healthcare, medical services. So some of the same common categories you have in Canada, probably a little bit further expanded in the US though. There's a lot on the digital and software side is another area. So the key thing there and why that's important is when you work with a tax provider, you could be selling on Shopify using Shopify Tax. You could be selling in QuickBooks Online. You want to make sure that your products are mapped to the appropriate category for that's relevant to that product or the appropriate tax code. So when you sell that product, there is an exemption applied if it's applicable in that state rule, or a partial exemption, or it's fully taxed again, accurately based on the definition of that product type. So that's an area that we find the mapping process or the category selection isn't always correct, which can result in over collection scenarios, under collection scenarios, and also customer service issues. Because a lot of people that know in a specific state like Minnesota, they might know that, hey, certain apparel types are exempt. So they'll know these things, and it's just important that you apply that appropriately so it doesn't impact your order to cash process and your conversions with your customers. I think another thing I see, and this is interesting, is selling in multiple channels. Now I'm selling in, I've got my direct to consumer sales or direct to business sales, and maybe I'm doing that on Shopify. I've got a wholesale strategy where I have resellers in the US, and then I have marketplace orders maybe on an Amazon. So it's important to understand that those order types all should be reported to the state, even though the wholesale orders are something where you are not liable for the sales tax that's ultimately charged because your reseller resells it to the end customer who then they charge the sales tax and remit it to the state. But you still have to report that as a wholesale exempt transaction in the states. And you're also required, another risk area is you have to have an exemption certificate for that scenario. So from the transaction to your wholesaler, you have to make sure that they provide you an exemption certificate that says, "Hey, I'm exempt from tax because I'm reselling your product." So those are low-hanging fruit areas that the certs side that the auditors will go after. And then specific to Amazon, we talked about potential physical nexus based on where the distribution centers are, but there can also be states that do count those transactions towards economic nexus. So again, you don't have to worry about the sales tax. Amazon is handling that under the marketplace facilitator laws, but you are still required to report those orders as exempt orders. And some states do count those under the definition of economic nexus, as well as the wholesale orders. Some don't, though, as well. Some count one, some count both, some count neither. And this is the definition of the state because you have 47 states that have sales tax and they have all different rules associated with them. There's not necessarily this alignment across there. So one of the things I hear from Shopify customers is I only look at my Shopify orders for economic nexus, but I'm selling on Amazon. I have wholesale orders, maybe in QuickBooks online. Am I doing it correctly? Well, it's good that you're tracking the Shopify stuff within the Shopify tracker, but you really want a system that tracks all your sales channels because you could have a very large wholesale or marketplace presence in the US and you start to sell D2C and that starts to grow. Well, suddenly you're like, oh, well, I only have a small portion of my business of D2C, but your wholesale or marketplace orders could have already triggered economic nexus in that specific state. So the challenge of all this, and I'm talking about this, and sometimes it may even sound, it's even confusing to me talking about this, is the challenge is they don't make it easy. There's not an alignment in the US that there should be. And I talked to Congress, this is back in 2013, I think. And my feedback was, hey, there should be an alignment of standards across the state, and it can happen at the federal level. You guys could help create some standards. That never happened, of course. So every state has its own rules. I think the biggest thing is having a level, whoever you work with or whatever service you work with, you want transparency, you want to comply. It's just all of these levels of complexity tied to taxability, what counts towards economic nexus, what are my requirements if I do wholesale? What are exemption certificates? There's a lot of areas for pitfalls that happen that create non-compliance. And I think that's what you think about is it's really important that you have a service or a partnership that helps you fill those gaps, that identifies those risk areas. Do you have to be perfect? No, right? But I think, do you want to kind of aim towards being as good as you can? Absolutely. So.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
sure Anna is happy that all of this is handled by Matt and the team because that was definitely a lot of a lot of different parts that you
Yeah,
have to
yeah. I mean,
balance and
it's
manage.
interesting too.
Yeah.
Stoko files in Colorado, right? This is another thing is Colorado has the state administered form. So you file the state form and there's about 250 jurisdictions under the state form, right? So great.
Mhm.
I filed, but they have 60 to 70 home rule locations like Denver, Colorado Springs, Aspen that say, hey, you have to file a separate return with us because maybe
Mhm.
we don't
Mhm.
trust the state to give us our money quick enough. So we want you to pay us direct and you have to file separate returns. And that's a whole nother thing in terms of, the challenge that sellers have is I have to file state return for Colorado, but then I have to file, all of these additional home rule location returns. Um, and I've had conversations with someone at Colorado Springs and their Department of Revenue, and I asked the question, have you thought about the impact on the small business? And they said, well, our it's only one return for us. It's pretty easy. And I said, yeah, but multiply that by 60. And they're like, I didn't really think about that. So, these are things that the challenge of doing business in the U.S. and being sales tax compliant.
Mhm.
So.
Well, yeah, I'd also love to hear Anna's like side of this as well. Well, because I'm assuming this is a lot of Colorado filing that you all do. Like, so when did sales tax cross from like we should look at this to we are exposed right now?
Well, yeah, that California filing was probably our first moment where it was like, this should be on our radar at this moment. And it had been, thankfully, my manager had secured a different platform to work with for sales tax solutions. But we were going into our busiest season. It was the holiday season, so our sales were increasing. And as Matt mentioned, you have that Shopify notification that's telling you you're about to reach Nexus. And that kind of started pinging for us, and it was something that we had to track. And it felt like, because of that rapid growth in that moment, we were hitting economic nexus in a new state like every few weeks. And it was like, oh, did we apply here? When did we turn that one on? And all of a sudden, it was something that consumed a lot of your time, because you're getting the notifications in Shopify, and then you're trying to make sure that everything is lined up, that you're filing for your state registrations, that you're completing the sales tax filing for whichever state that we have now registered in and reached economic nexus. And so we had found a platform that was going to help us and set us up with that hands-off experience. Connect to the store, we'll take care of everything. Register us when we hit nexus, file our returns, but it didn't quite live up to its promises. And so it required a lot of work on our end to manage that more than we had intended to. And that's of all of those specific requirements that Matt was speaking to, were things that we had to inform ourselves on, as we were almost becoming the watchdog of our sales tax, when that shouldn't have been the case, because, as I mentioned, we were just learning it as we go. So we hit that moment of, this has to be something that we keep track of on a consistent basis. And we just make sure that we are doing our best. As Matt mentioned, it wasn't perfect, but we're doing our best to make sure that we're taking the steps necessary and completing it best that we can. Yeah, and I can speak to what happens next after Zamp does join our life, but it was definitely something that we took on, and it was something that we had to figure out. And we brought in that first partner to help us out, and thought it was taken care of, but it was much more difficult than that. So yeah.
Well, yeah, no, that ties in perfectly to my next question, which is like, now that this is off your plate, like, what does your week actually look like, right? And for someone who's also, I guess, just inheriting this U.S. like sales tax piece, what would you tell them, or what would you tell the ops person at that brand, if there's one thing that they need to know?
Well, I think first, to give a little bit of context of where we came from with that previous software that we had. They had promised us, we'll take care of it. And it really was like, we paid for, I'm going to be a little bit blunt, we overpaid for a broken calculator to file our sales tax, because it just wasn't working. The pricing was dishonest. We didn't have any support. We didn't have any communication, and it was difficult for us. And so we kind of had to evaluate our options at that moment. Like, we needed to make sure the company was taken care of. And then Zamp came on our radar, and it was this breath of fresh air. And we had a clear picture of what we needed to solve for. We needed a specialist. We needed an expert. We needed people that weren't just a software. And we wanted to work with a company that was transparent with what they were going to offer us, with the cost, what support would look like. And we kind of approached them with a little bit of a grain of salt from our previous experience, but they honestly were exactly what we needed. We noticed that they were very patient with us. As we mentioned, like, our product is a classified medical device, so there are some nuances to that, and it's a bit more complex web of sales tax rules. But their team would have meeting after meeting with us of, let's work together. Let's actually collaborate on finding the solution that you need to help your company in the moment that you're in. And it was, I can't tell you how grateful we were for discovering them, because they didn't force us into like a generic template of like plug and play and here you go. They listened to us. We also had some tricky nuances with our return system, and the Zamp team, it was just a collaboration from the start, really. And we loved that they actually tried to understand our business rather than just assuming and letting it go. And from that, Zamp earned our trust from the get-go, and we're so happy to have them and help us be where we are now. So yeah. might have steered away
No,
from your
yeah.
question there a little
No,
bit.
but that's great to hear, right? Because like yeah, you're absolutely correct, right? Like software is just one of the pieces, but the human touch is the thing that really matters. But yeah, and I guess because I think you mentioned earlier in the conversation that Stoko was hitting economic nexus in states just over and over again, right? So as Stoko keeps scaling in the US, like what's the next thing that you're trying to get ahead of before it becomes a bigger problem?
Honestly, there's so many hurdles that you have to overcome being a small business that it's hard to quantify what exactly that is, that future problem. I feel like every day there's something that comes across our plate that we're like, hey, let's find a solution to this right now. I think one thing I will say is the peace of mind that we have at this moment with our US sales tax. It peacefully hums in the background and we don't have to worry about that piece anymore, which is awesome. Um, but I think right now, moving forward, it's more about not what's the next problem we're trying to solve, but more about how can we fine tune this and kind of expand on the success that we've already had, as opposed to trying to enter some area new and then discovering a whole new set of problems. I think our leadership here at the company has been great at let's just get better at what we're doing, as opposed to uncovering some new problems that we didn't know existed. And I think that focus has really helped us stay on track for success.
Okay, yeah, amazing, amazing. Yeah, that's great to hear, right? When I think peace of mind is something that many entrepreneurs love to pay for, right? If there's something that can just quietly hum in the background, I think
That's right.
that's better than anyone can ask. Um, but yeah, I guess perfectly. I want to leave some time for Q&A because I know that we have an hour scheduled. So before that, like, because Anna, I know been speaking about Zamp a lot, right? Like how Zamp has been quietly humming in the background. So Matt, I wanted to give you kind of an opportunity to talk about Zamp, like who it's for, yeah, and any next steps of people, entrepreneurs in the room who just realized they're exposed.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I guess the key thing about our business model and the way we go to market is we talk about it as a managed solution. So it's the combination of tech and people to enable a high level of compliance and hands off for our customers. And I think the biggest thing, and the way I look at it is you have software out there. There's, lots of different good software options out there, but the key thing is we are more than just software. We own the outcome for you. So owning the outcome means we take responsibility for doing it the right way and really taking it off your plate, right? Reducing the amount of time that you need to spend on it. So that's been a big piece. I think the other thing is we have been very conscious of having really strong US sales tax expertise in-house and available to our customers and our partners, because ultimately issues are going to happen, or there's going to be changes that happen, or things that have to be navigated. And we've got the team that knows how to do it, that knows, that has first name relationships with people at some of the different state Department of Revenues and understands how to resolve issues. A classic one is, I've been collecting sales tax, but I haven't registered in some of these states. I turned it on maybe in Shopify, and so working with our customers, to build a game plan. They come to us and they say, "Here's my issue." We look at it, we understand the requirements, where they are, where they're non-compliant, and we build a game plan to address that to get them go forward compliant. So no matter what situation a customer comes to us in, either if they have potential multiple years of liability issues or whether they're fully compliant to start, we work with them to figure out what needs to happen. So back to that, humming in the background comment from Anna, like that peace of mind to say, hey, it's taken care of and we're now, we've fixed it and we're moving forward. That's how we operate as a partner. Just really important in terms of the model that we leverage.
Amazing. Thanks a bunch, Matt,
Sure.
for that. And yeah, Matt and team are providing us a free Nexus assessment and analysis as well as 3 months of free service just for the Ecom North community and those who've joined this webinar. So if you'd like to connect with Zamp, please let us know. For those inside the Ecom North community, you can let me know as well. I will connect you directly with the Zamp team. For those who are not yet in our community, definitely join our community. But we definitely reach out to the Ecom North team. I believe it's hello@ecomnorth.com if you'd like us to connect with Zamp as well. So now to go on to the Q&A. If you could drop your questions in the chat here, and we'll let you come off mic one at a time so that you can talk to Matt directly, pick his brain about any U.S. sales tax items. I already know that we have a few questions that have come in. Muroki, I'm not sure if you can unmute yourself here, but I'll say your question and then you can let me know if there's anything else you'd like to add on top of that. I think Miruki mentioned, is there a way to negotiate filing frequency with a state? For instance, Virginia requires us to file monthly, which is annoying for only $50 to $70 in taxes.
Yeah, most states will have the ability to negotiate or to set the schedule based on your revenue volume. One thing that will happen is sometimes they will increase your volume if you cross a certain revenue threshold, and that usually happens like in the January timeframe, so the beginning of the year. But if you are below a threshold where you shouldn't be filing monthly, absolutely, you can contact them direct to work to reduce that schedule. Because again, if you're only filing, $50 to $70 of taxes and you're on a monthly schedule, that frequency is too high. I would need to confirm specific to Virginia, but there should be an option where you could go to quarterly, even maybe even annually as well.
I think Miruki, or did you?
I just unmuted.
Yeah, amazing. Okay.
I was admittedly chewing on a salad, so no one needed to hear that. Okay, that's good to know because I know
Yeah.
because we've hit Nexus in several states, and it seems like the states had sort of determined the filing frequency for us. And most states were reasonable, and then Virginia was not. But I wasn't 100% certain whether that's just some sort of particular rule that they had or whether there was an opportunity to go back because we pay every time we file as well. So we're paying a filing fee because we don't do it ourselves. And then we're paying $50 on top of that, which is for me like just not cost effective whatsoever. So it's good to be able to know that we can go and renegotiate that.
Absolutely.
Lee, I know you
Absolutely.
probably saw a plethora of other questions from me too, but if other people have questions, I don't have to state them yet.
Yeah, no, feel free to continue because I think you had one or two more questions.
Yeah, and
So
two
yeah,
more.
we have a bit of time. So yeah, feel free
Yeah.
to ask your questions. Yeah.
So Matt, I know you talked a little bit about the uniqueness of certain types of products, whether they're medical, digital, whatever, and we have several digital products in our catalog. And I know from asking around and doing my research, a number of our digital products sort of fall into a gray area with how they're categorized. They're not quite a game, they're not quite a book, they're not quite a software. And so I've been sort of told that I just sit in a great digital gray zone and I should just categorize to the absolute best of my ability. What are the chances that a state would try and run an audit on our sales and our catalogs, some years in because they just decide our sales volume looks really high and they would like to try and make more money from us? And they decide our gray area product suddenly falls within, let's say, a higher sales tax bracket, and we get retroactively billed for that, or penalized even.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that, and you're spot on. Like the digital area has a lot of the gray area around taxability because there's components tied to the function of the software, the access of the software, how it's delivered. So there are impact areas tied to software that tied to function, etc. And so I think the biggest thing you want to do when you analyze that is you want to understand all the components of your software and look across potentially multiple scenarios. I'll give you an example. We were working with a company that sold software as a service, and they came to us and they said, "Well, we're exempt in North Carolina," and we said, "Okay." Yeah, I mean, SaaS is exempt in North Carolina. But then we dove into what the functions of the software provided, and it actually was streaming content to their franchisees. So it was music, dynamic pricing, video, and so on to the store level. And we were able to walk them through the fact that digital content is taxable in North Carolina. So when you combine the two, when you sell them under one SKU, essentially the SaaS as part, providing digital content, it becomes taxable in North Carolina. And so that was something that we were able to work with them on to figure out, hey, how can you basically align with the state definition, and be compliant, where again you do have some potential audit risks down the road. So I think the biggest thing you can say is yes, there can be gray area, and yes, you can be ahead of the states in terms of your product type. They may not even know this product type exists because that's how fast things are moving right now, right in the world. And ultimately, though, I think you want to make a selection that is the most conservative for your business that aligns with some of these components that I talked about. You should have, you should have some work or support from your partner in this. I'm happy to assist and provide some feedback if you wanted that as a follow-on to this session where we can do an analysis and give you our opinion based on what we learned from the call. But definitely something you want to look into.
Yeah, I'd be curious, but I mean, I mean, when, you talked about much more sophisticated products than us, we're like, I would call us the neo like fight of the, I don't know, of the digital world, because it's literally just PDF versions of our physical products. It's
Okay.
essentially people who don't want to, um,
Did I?
I think we may
Is
have
it just
lost
me?
her.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we may have lost Maroki. Yeah.
Well,
we did.
if it's PDFs, it could fall under digital content. I'll continue that. And then, Maroki, if you can hear me, I'm happy to, as a follow-up to this, to help if you have any additional questions on that.
yeah, sure. I don't know what happened there. Seems like a bunch
Oh,
of
you're back. Good.
Yeah,
Boy.
I got this like request to join as a panelist, and I clicked in, and like my whole Zoom just exploded violently as it
Oh,
happened.
wow.
So
We wanted to, someone offered you, yeah, you could join the panel here.
Lee gave
You
me
graduated up.
powers. Yeah, Lee gave me powers. Okay, yeah, I'd be interested. I was just saying that my product is essentially like just a PDF version of our physical products for people who want print at home. But we can discuss that further. And then my final
Sure.
question was just, I'm kind of unsure. I feel like I've gotten some conflicting information on just how um how I don't know, the powers that be determine when we hit Nexus. Because obviously, as I think it was Anna was saying, like uh like she get the flag on Shopify, and you're like, oh no, I have hit Nexus. And I think it's been interesting because there are a couple times where we've been flagged. But I guess allegedly it's based on a rolling 12-month period. So at one point
Yeah.
we got flagged that we hit Nexus, and then next thing you know, we're not hitting Nexus. And then we have hit Nexus again. And we have, and then then you go, okay, then what is the true parameters, right? Like, is it rolling 12 months for 3 months we successfully hit Nexus and therefore you have now hit Nexus? Is it rolling 12 months you hit Nexus and that's like the immediate time you need to kind of panic and do the work that needs to be done? It's been very unclear to me, and because it kind of comes and goes, sometimes you kind of lose the flags and you're not sure what you're supposed to follow up on. So if you can provide some clarity on that, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, yeah. So the states have varying definitions. Some look at trailing 12 months. So that would be a trailing indicator across a 12-month period. And then some states look at previous calendar year or current calendar year. So it varies across the states. And the key thing is you're looking at the right period according to each state's specific rules. So again, it can vary by state though. So I think you're looking at it where you may be crossing Nexus in a year, and then the new year starts, and you're no longer there, and it's a fresh start. So that is the previous calendar year, current calendar year scenario. But if you triggered it in the previous year, you are potentially you have triggered that requirement to collect and remit in that state. So again, it's the trailing 12 months for some states, some is previous or current calendar year.
Right. So maybe specifically looking at trailing 12 months then. I guess I'm trying to understand. So it's like the moment we hit the first round of trailing 12 months, we are liable and we should register. No?
Well, some states do have, upon that immediate transaction, you are supposed to register and start collecting and remitting. Some states, though, give you a little bit more of a window. Some states will say, oh, you have until, 30 days, or you have until, the first of next year. So there are different rules depending on the state. I think the biggest thing, we look at is, if you trigger Nexus in a month and you register the next month, that's very reasonable, in terms of the action, taking action on the event. If you are triggered it like 2 years ago when you haven't done anything, then that's probably some scenario where there may be some risk, right? But I think there are different rules depending on the state expectations of when you should register based on when you cross the threshold.
Hmm.
So, and
Okay.
our system has that built in. So we actually will notify you specific to the state rules. Some of our customers say, I don't want to wait a month. Let's just do it now. I approve the registration and we'll do it with an effective date or maybe the first of the next month. Other customers, just so you know, we do have customers that say, hey, I triggered in Ohio. My product is $25. I had 200 orders and it's not material. Like I don't, back to the 50 or $70 filing in Virginia, I don't want to register. And they have that right to make that decision, because the liability is so small. There's a business discussion here of I'm not going to register there. Some states have gotten rid of their order component, but Ohio is one of those states that still has it. So sometimes you could look at what is the cost of my product. Another interesting thing is if your product is fully exempt in that state, there are customers that will go ahead and register. They just say, we're going to report $0 returns. But we have customers that say we don't want to do that because we don't want to push, this is more paperwork. Like, why do we want to add
I
another
don't want the
state?
IRS I don't want the IRS having more information on me than absolutely necessary.
Well, that would be the state level, right? But
Yeah,
the
well,
key
I
thing the
guess
key thing is but there could be eventually an income tax requirement in that state if they have it based on thresholds as well in terms of your volume in that state. But I think the biggest thing to your point is I kind of like when I think about my compliance, what I think is a good place to be is I guess I compare it to the classroom. Like if you sat at the front of the classroom in high school and you were like taking copious notes and the teacher loved you and you're probably like doing everything to the T, right? If you're kind of in the back, you're probably not compliant and you're probably not in a good spot. So I kind of like that middle zone, where you're just like, hey, I'm going to make good decisions to be compliant, but I'm also going to do things that maybe make decisions that are good for my business as well, where the risk is low or my product is exempt. So,
yeah.
yeah,
Okay. Thank
yeah,
you.
great question.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Miroki, for the amazing questions. All right, next up, Kevin has asked, what are the tax requirements and implications if you run an Amazon store in the States, but the business operates in Canada?
So, if you are only selling through Amazon, um, you're only selling through Amazon, that means you don't have any tax requirements per se in the US, right? So your whole strategy is marketplace. You're selling on Amazon, that's it. There's no sales tax requirements. The only thing I would say is if you add a direct to consumer D2C, or if you add direct sales, that's when you have to start thinking about, hey, I may have a tax requirement based on your potential physical nexus exposure and or your economic nexus exposure. So if you're just doing marketplace, you're good. If you add a direct sale through Shopify, for example, now that's something you have to think about.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you for that. And I think Steve also had a question, which is, as a Canadian business currently operating almost exclusively within Canada, but seeking to expand in the US? And are there any major or notable milestones that would trigger sales tax obligations, um, or necessitate working with a company like Zamp or hiring a US bookkeeper or accountant? Yeah.
Yeah, good question. Yeah, so I think the biggest thing is as you set your goal in the US, for the first thing you should think about is, are we going to have any physical presence there via like a 3PL where you have inventory, or are you going to have an employee in the US? So those are things you just first off have to think about. What is your go-to-market strategy in the US? And then if everything is done from Canada, right, then ultimately it's just a process of understanding, what your sales volumes. You should have a system that does track that against the US economic nexus rules to make sure you're tracking, hey, do I have potential exposure based on the order or revenue volume? And you can do that again through Shopify, and our platform has a tracker as well, but that's important. One thing I do want to mention is Zamp is actually rolling out support for Canada as well. So we are in the process of completing that. That'll be available July 1st. So we're going to also be supporting compliance in Canada. We're excited about adding that in. A lot of that drive is because of our US customers that are crossing the 30,000 Canadian threshold, and they need support for a number of the provincials and so on. That's driving that setup. But we also expect that we're going to have Canadian customers that need US that say, hey, by the way, you guys do Canada too. That's great. Could we bundle it all under one? Absolutely. So we expect to see some of that as well.
Okay, amazing. And Chris had a question for you, Matt, which was, does Zamp have experience in assisting and or advising clients on voluntary disclosure for missed state sales tax? And also, does Zamp have a legal team that can assist Canadian companies with this process if appropriate?
Yeah, so we the thing that we do is, as part of that assessment to understand your exposure and then the liability exposure, we have a process where we determine what makes the most sense as part of that game plan. And I would say there are scenarios where a voluntary disclosure, as you guys call them, voluntary proposal in Canada, VDP versus a VDA in the US, but where it does make sense. The VDA in the US limits the look back period 3 years. So if you have like exposure that's multiple years back, beyond 3 years, it definitely makes sense. And there are some other scenarios where it will make sense. Now, VDAs are not cheap, right? They definitely, there's a cost associated with them. And we have SALT partners that we work with that we refer those to. I will tell you though, what's been nice about our model is we also look at it in terms of, is there an opportunity to effectively clean up some of the past due requirements without doing a VDA? Maybe the period isn't as long as 3 years. Maybe it's just a year or two, or maybe it's not as material. And so we're able to register you with a past due effective date at the state. And then we will ask the state back to the filing schedule. We will ask California or Texas or whatever state you have a past due on. We want an annual schedule to start, filing schedule. The benefit of that is we're able to clean up your year of issue or multiple years of issue, and the penalties and interest would be only 1 month versus 12 months on a monthly. This is the work of people that know the process, know how to get our customers in a situation to clean up cost effectively and save you money. And these are the people that are ex-state auditors, SALT experts that are working with the states. So that's been a really beneficial thing for us in terms of our ability to save our customers money, but also get them to be go forward compliant. Ultimately, the game plan is go forward compliance. We will determine what makes the most sense for each state and then execute on that game plan going forward. So good question.
Okay. Yeah, we have a lot of great questions in the chat today. But yeah, and our last question from Steve as well is that any recommendations on Shopify and QuickBooks integrations that handle sales tax well? They found that Intuit Connector falls short, doesn't really classify Canadian tax correctly, and Shopify data is there incorrect. And I think Steve has mentioned he started looking at A2X, Webgility, MyWorks, any of these tools, yeah, that are good, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, I would want to understand what specifically you're looking at. Are you looking at specifically like this for sales tax, for income tax, and so on, and ultimately like where are the issues or concerns? Just specific from a sales tax perspective, Shopify tax, no solution is fully accurate in the US. Like I could say we're fully accurate. There no one is, right? We're always working towards that goal. And that's ultimately the goal, being able to deliver rooftop accuracy and so on, and making sure all the taxability exemptions are applied correctly. But Shopify tax has gotten a lot better over the years. And so I would say like it's a pretty darn good service for the US today. Zamp does have an integration to QuickBooks, for real-time calculations on the sales tax side as well. So you have a couple of different options there on the sales tax side, but I'd want to understand more what specifically you're referring to from the tax perspective, and happy to, point you any direction I can in terms of, things that we know and partners that we work with.
Yeah, and Steve, if you have more questions as well, feel free to connect with us or Zamp directly. Yeah, we'll be happy to make the connection. But I know we're coming to time here, just that too. So it was good timing, I think, from all our ends. I know founders are busy, so I want to respect all your time. Thank you, Anna and Matt, a bunch for joining us today. And thank you all for coming to the Scaling Beyond Borders webinar. But yeah, I think that's all we have for today. Yeah,
Thank you, Lee.
Matt, Anna, anything closing, feel free to chime in.
I think I would just want to say, like anybody who's starting to face the complications of US sales tax, that you're not alone in facing these difficulties, and you have great communities like Ecom North to help provide support. And I think sometimes it's a little defeating to ask for help, especially when you're trying to figure out things on the fly and move quickly. But the right help is out there. And I just hope that the story that we shared today can help somebody else from making some expensive detours that we took along the way and finding the right solution. I just want to say thank you to Ecom North for having me today. And thank you to Matt for a great company over at Zamp.
Okay, amazing. Thanks a bunch, folks. All right, have a great rest of your Wednesday.
Bye.
Goodbye.